Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my humble hacienda, my casa, my home here on the hill in Livingston, Montana. I have got December 7th of 2021. Now, what I'm going to do in this video here, hopefully I can keep this thing short. I'm starting to get a headache about this subject, meaning Alec Baldwin. I've already done a couple of videos. Hopefully this will be the last video I do. You know, there's just some things I wanted to get off my chest. Some things that weren't setting right with me, especially after he gave that interview with that George Stephanopoulos. In all reality, Alec Baldwin, when it comes to firearms, had better learn to shut his mouth. That's what I got to say, because it's quite... Okay, you take like all these rules for firearm safety, like, you know, never point a firearm at anybody. You know, make sure your firearm is loaded or unloaded. You know, make sure, you know, what's behind your target. Never put your finger inside the trigger well unless you're going to fire the piece, and on like this. But there's one thing that I never hear anybody say, and that is know your firearm. You take like yesterday, I made a video and I mentioned something about fanning them old 6-shooters, you know, them old single action 6-shooters. I take that back. I don't want anybody to know anything about fanning an old 6-shooter, because they're going to go down in the lower 40 and blow their foot off. That's what's going to happen, you know. But there is a way that if you know how the mechanisms work, where you can take and fan that hammer and get it to fire, not exactly like a semi-auto loader, but you get the idea, one round right after the other. I am sure that didn't go on the movie set of the stage set, or the movie set of the Western movie called Rust. But getting back to what I was saying a minute or so ago, know your firearms. I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that goofy Alec Baldwin doesn't know the difference between a single action revolver and a double action revolver. You know, because if you knew these firearms, you wouldn't have been messing around with the trigger. You wouldn't have been messing around with the hammer. See, that's all lawyer lies, you know, because on those type of firearms, you've got to have that hammer cocked all the way back, then you can fire it. And there has to be human interaction, unless there's something wrong with the firearm, it's mechanically broke down or whatever have you. And that's how I feel that it looks to me that's Alec Baldwin's defense is headed that way. Oh, well, the firearm just went off. Firearms, generally speaking, I have never ever seen a firearm just go off. There's always been something that's happened. Somebody's either loading it or unloading it, or fooling around with hammers, fooling around with triggers. And then there's this old saying, I didn't know the firearm was loaded. That's the oldest excuse in the book. You know, but in my case, I've owned, I don't know, I was trying to think about this here the other day. I've owned at least a half a dozen old 6-shooters in my day. I don't think I've ever owned a double action. They've all been single action, but it's been many, many years, because I switched over to semi-auto loaders probably back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I'm not up to snuff, if you will, on the old 6-shooters, but I've shot plenty of them. You know, and generally speaking, these old 6-shooters are not going off. And like I say, I'm repeating myself, unless there's human interaction. You take like old Alec Baldwin, he shouldn't have been playing around with that hammer anyway. He shouldn't have been playing around with anything. All that stuff that's coming out that went on, he shouldn't have been doing. Shouldn't have been pointing that at that lady cameraman. You know, shouldn't have been messing around with no hammers or no triggers or whatever have you. And what else I want to say? Oh, yeah, this is the big one here. I know dang well that Alec Baldwin is a leftist, He probably doesn't even like firearms to begin with, yet he's out there making movies and making millions of dollars. Now, what kind of a hypocrite is this? This stuff puts me in a foul mood, people that exploit firearms like that, they yet want that. They want our firearms taken away from us, our Second Amendment rights, and that kind of stuff. People like him shouldn't be allowed to even mess around with firearms. And the way that they've got this movie set arrangement with these armors and these assistant directors and all that stuff is all goofed up, because I know doggone well if this Alec Baldwin, he's either going to blame the firearm or he's going to blame somebody else. It's just that simple. Whether it be that young lady that's supposed to be an armorer, she wasn't qualified. Half of them people on that set weren't qualified to be messing around with firearms. And then there's the business of live ammo. How did that all come about? See, these fools here, man. But my biggest concern is that I know doggone well, if I even did anything like what Alec Baldwin does, shoving people around, all that stuff I seen him do in Manhattan, New York City, and all this other stuff. If you done that kind of stuff here, treated people like shit in Livingston, Montana, you know what's going to happen to you? You're going straight to jail. I had to repeat myself. You're going straight to jail. And that includes him, too. Because these cops up here in Montana don't give a shit. They don't even have to read you your Miranda rights. The judge does that. You go barking at a cop saying, I want my Miranda rights, and they'll just look at you and laugh and throw you in jail. And if you push it far enough, they're just going to tell you, that's not our job, that's the judge's job. And pushing people around and doing like what Alec Baldwin, treating people like crap and putting people in headlocks and all this stuff, straight to jail you'll go. They catch you up here in Montana, But yeah, this guy is just simply not going to take responsibility for killing that Alina Hutchinson. I think that was her name, or Alina. You have to forgive me. I'm not, I've seen lots of pictures of her and everything like that. But the simple fact of the matter is Alec Baldwin handled that piece, that 6-shooter. He didn't check the cylinder to see what kind of rounds were in there and all that stuff. And those kind of pistols like that, they don't just go off. You have to pull that hammer back all the way. There's a couple indents. There's a first indent, a safety, and blah, blah, blah. But even at that point right there, if you let go of the hammer, nothing's going to happen. You have to pull that hammer back all the way and then squeeze that trigger. That has to be. All these lies that I've been seeing, or especially with that interview he had with George Stephanopoulos, almost every other word that come out of Alec Baldwin's face was a lie. One lie right after the other, because the only thing he's concerned about is saving his own skin. But in my case, I'm getting a headache over all this stuff here, and I need to stop talking about it because we live in a society that's full of, instead of people helping each other and caring about each other and stuff like that, I'm going to tell you what's happening here, ladies and gentlemen. We're starting to live into a society full of killers, murderers. It's all over the news. It's all over YouTube. You can't get away from it. So-and-so done this, so-and-so killed that, and all these school shootings and everything like that. If I had my way about it, I'd take a bullwhip to a button. There's a lot of people running around, let me put it to you this way, there's a lot of people running around that shouldn't have firearms. Because first of all, they don't understand what these things can do, they don't understand how the firearm operates, and this list goes, they don't understand about firearm safety, and they could care less about the law, and all that. All they want to do is be criminals. All these hoodlums and gang members and all this nonsense. I can tell you one thing, this stuff doesn't go on up here in Montana. You're going to find yourself up in the state big house. You get to screwing around too much up here in this country. Okay, that's all I got to say. I hope this is all I ever have to say about this subject. Because, like I say, that Alec Baldwin, he's just trying to save his skin any way he can. But there's no excuse. A firearm just doesn't go off. You know, it went off because of shit that he did, because of actions that he did. Okay, what am I at? A little over 10 minutes. That's enough. I'm out of here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for putting up with me. Adios, my friends, and we shall see you on down the trail.